It is consistently baffling to me how uninformed, how intentionally uninformed game developers are when it comes to devlogs. No matter where you go, whether it's YouTube game development advice videos, especially r slash game dev, man, on this channel, I'm going to be dismantling a lot of the echo chamber stuff on r slash game dev, man, because it's crazy. But this is prevalent everywhere. Anytime that you see somebody asking, oh, hey guys, I've been considering starting a devlog series on YouTube for my game, the comments will be flooded with people saying, devlogs are stupid because they only appeal to other game developers. That is so just the most dull opinion. I'm sorry. That is dull. They don't need to appeal to game developers. If you make a devlog and you make it in such a way that it appeals to game developers, then it will appeal to game developers. If you make a devlog in such a way that it appeals to gamers and players, to your target demographic, then it will appeal to your target demographic. Wow, isn't that crazy? So, here's the deal. I did a devlog series for my game Choo-Choo Charles. It's, depending on how you calculate it, it's either like the second or third most successful devlog series on all of YouTube. It gained me 200,000 wish lists, approximately, maybe a little bit more. It's gained tens of millions of views, and it was one of the best things possible from a PR perspective that you could possibly have. Do you think those tens of millions of people and the hundred, I'm over 500,000 subscribers, do you think those 500,000 people are all game developers? The answer is no, they're not, because that would be weird. If you watch any of my devlogs, you'll see very, very quickly that they're not really about programming. I'm not sitting there going, so today I used the Pythagorean theorem to blah, 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 and then I graphed the coordinates to... No, because that would be boring and it would only appeal to developers. But if you make it entertaining and you make it in such a way that it appeals to the people that your game should appeal to, then you can actually build an audience. So ultimately, what I want to do today is I want to actually give you the nuance of the utility of devlogs. How can devlogs be used? What are the myths about them? I mean, one of them I already just dispelled. And should you actually do a devlog? It's a conversation that requires nuance. It's not a binary thing. It's not just, no, because they're dumb. That's a weird way to look at it. And it's... yeah, so I'm just going to get into it as somebody who has actually done devlogs. Okay, so the first myth is just simply that devlogs only appeal to other game developers. That is true if you make devlogs that are heavy on programming, that are really unedited, that are really boring, that are really dull, and are just uninteresting, okay? If you make a devlog in just kind of the normal, typical YouTubery YouTube format, then it'll be appealing to a broad audience. You know, avoiding deep technical discussion, focusing more on the things that you added, the cool features in your game, and showing off art, showing off visual things, showing off funny bugs and how you fixed them. Generally, you know, you're not getting into deep technical discussions, but a simple explanation like, oh, turns out the collision was wrong, and so that's why he was falling through the floor. Like, it doesn't need to be complicated. It still is crazy to me because, and it's not even like I'm not the only developer that's been successful with devlogs. Dani obviously is one of the main examples. He's pulled hundreds of millions of views on his channel. His game Karlson has gained, I think he's sitting around 800,000 wish lists based on my estimates. Although the game hasn't come out yet, if it was to come out, it would make, I think, well over $10 million. Okay, that would be a massive success. There are other channels like Fancy, who did Escape the Backrooms. His devlog series gained him, I don't know, probably like 100,000 wish lists pre-launch. And it blew up a lot with YouTubers and stuff post-launch, but it got the ball rolling in a way that he was able to absolutely body all the other competition in the Backrooms gaming space, because there's a lot of Backrooms games. But his is the biggest, partially because he got a massive push from his YouTube audience early on. You know, there's other developers like Pawnee Pants, who managed to have a pretty decent launch for Punch a Bunch. And there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that there can't be other developers that can follow in all of these footsteps. So it never ceases to amaze me how many people just completely ignore these key examples that are all very obvious. Like, it's very obvious that the devlogs that are successful don't appeal to developers, and that it's an intentional thing that you can do. But people just ignore it because that's what everybody else says. Echo chamber. It's dumb, but whatever. All right, second myth is that it takes all of your time, and that, like, oh, if you start doing a devlog series, man, you're not going to have any time to work on your game. You're just going to spend all the time just working on devlogs, you know? It's like, man, you got to put out a devlog like every week, and it's like you spend 2 days working on the game and then 3 days working on videos. So it's like you have no time left over to actually finish the game. Okay, first of all, why are you trying to make a devlog every week? Why are you trying to make a devlog every month? And usually the answer to this is people will be like, oh, well, you know, like the YouTube algorithm wants you to be consistent. It doesn't. That's a myth. That is not true at all. All of the biggest YouTubers agree and will tell you. I mean, here, it's based on your audience, okay? If your audience forgets that you exist within a week, your content was probably pretty bad to begin with. But the algorithm itself isn't really going to treat your videos any differently if you upload a week later. On TikTok, might be a slightly different story. I don't know exactly. You know, there's nuance across all of the different platforms. But if you're making YouTube devlogs, YouTube is really, really good about allowing you to take time off. I think way back, maybe 5, 6, 7 years back, there was a big push where the algorithm was really, really getting your content out there if you were doing like daily uploads. So a lot of channels were doing that. But they have since retired that. That is not a thing. I uploaded or didn't upload for like nearly a year. And my first video back, I think, got like 300,000 views in a day. Okay. Which is pretty much what I was getting previously. So, and it wasn't even a great video, to mind you. But YouTube's algorithm really doesn't penalize you. You know, for like the Choo-Choo Charles devlogs, there were times where I would take like 4 months in between devlogs. 4 months. And it did not negatively impact the performance at all. They were still getting millions of views. You know, on top of that, the idea that you need to document and include every single tiny piece of content in your devlog and make these updates super, super frequently just isn't true. You know, ultimately, if you want a devlog to actually go viral, to actually get views, to actually be entertaining, you probably shouldn't be focusing. 'Cause here's the deal, man. We all know game development takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to make just small pieces of visual progress. So if you do a week's worth of work and you're like, hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about the 3 wall textures I added. Be sure to like and subscribe and come back next week for when I add 3 floor textures. Obviously that's not entertaining. You should have more time in between devlogs. Stockpile a bunch of footage. Stockpile a bunch of footage for actually interesting stuff. Oh, look, here's a bunch of guns. Here's a bunch of cool items. Look at these new characters and character customization I added. Visual, cool, interesting stuff that might take a little bit longer, you know, more development time in between devlogs is going to be better. And that naturally makes it so that you don't have to spend as much time on devlogs anyways, because you're only hitting on the key points that are actually interesting. And it's going to be way better for the entertainment value, for the algorithm, and for your own time management. So those are like the main myths, the main things that people talk about revolving around devlogs that I think are just not true. As somebody who has done devlogs successfully and unsuccessfully, I tried doing devlogs for a while before Choo-Choo Charles and it didn't work. So I actually know what works and what doesn't and how to make it work. So now I'm going to talk about what's the upside. What is the potential that devlogs have if you are actually doing it right? So as far as marketing goes, devlogs give you essentially the best view to action conversion of any form of social media marketing, okay? It's better than a clip on Twitter, because a clip on Twitter, it's very short. You can't get a really good idea of the game. You don't get to know the developer at all. it's very surface level. A devlog that's 5, 10, 20 minutes long, you get to know the developer a little bit, you get to know even more about the game, you get to see some of the process, you get to feel like you're in the know. It naturally has way, way, way better conversion rates than basically any other social media marketing that developers typically do. Better conversions than a trailer, better conversions than just about anything. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Again, for Choo-Choo Charles, the game launched with it was like 550,000 wish lists. Okay, I think at least 200,000 of those were due to devlogs. I would upload a single devlog and it can pull like 30, 40,000 wish lists. Okay, that's insane. That is insane. You're not going to do that posting clips on Twitter. At least probably not. Technically you could, but probably not. There are examples of games that have done stuff kind of like that. But again, all that to say, devlogs can work. They're also good for funding. Because ultimately, again, if you start doing devlogs, you are becoming a YouTuber. YouTubers can make money. Wow, crazy. Who would have guessed? But obviously you need to be big enough. You need to be operating at a moderately high level. If you're pulling a couple 100,000 views per video, you're probably making at least a couple $100s per video, and you probably have the opportunity to get at least multi-$1,000 sponsorships. That was a big deal for me when I started because I didn't really have a way to fund the development of Choo-Choo Charles. So making money off of, I took a couple of sponsorships, got a bunch of ad revenue, and I was able to put that back into the game. Again, that's a tough one because you have to be operating at a pretty high level. If you're just getting a couple thousand views per video, you're not making anything off of that. So that's like the peak upside, okay? But now, what's the nuance of it, okay? Because again, it's never binary. It's never binary. I'm not going to say, oh, everybody's dumb, everybody should just do a devlog, because that would be stupid. In the same way that saying, nobody should do a devlog, devlogs only appeal to developers. In the same way that that's also stupid. So here's the nuance. First off, like I was kind of saying before, devlogs are not the most efficient way to get attention for your game. They're very efficient, but they're not the most efficient. And keep in mind, they're only very efficient if you're operating at a high level. The most efficient ways to get attention for your game is through demos and YouTubers. Okay, like other YouTubers doing gameplay videos and streamers, other people making content about your game. And demos that get, a lot of attention via, let's say like a Steam Next Fest or something like that. Those are probably the most efficient ways. But even then, like with demos, for example, demos are difficult because it does take a lot of time, right? If you're going to take 2 months to prep a really nice demo, 2 months is probably about as much time as you would spend making a bunch of really high quality devlogs for your game. When I was working on Choo-Choo Charles, I doubt I probably didn't put more than a month's worth of actual time towards making devlogs, okay, over the 14, 15 months of development, okay? So the demos, that's not like a zero effort thing. So depending on what you're doing, it's kind of a wash. And then when it comes to YouTubers, that'll happen after your game launches, right? If your game is really interesting, if it allows YouTubers to pull more views than they would be able to pull off of other games, and it's, you've got good characters, people can make good thumbnails out of it, people get good retention off of it, then they'll get more views and they'll play your game and it'll go viral and get billions of views. That is a really efficient way to get views because all you have to do is make a viral game. Which sounds, a lot of people hear that and go like, what do you mean you just... I'll talk about that more in other videos. All that to say, there are more efficient ways to get views. For me, even with my current project, Cuff Bust, the devlogs for this game so far are none of them have even hit 1 million views. They're pulling, I think the first one did 500,000 and the last few have been in between 1 and 200,000, which is still great. Those are still good view counts, but I'm only getting, maybe a few thousand wish lists per video. Not nearly the same as getting 40,000 wish lists per video off of Choo-Choo Charles. That is a big difference. And I guess that wasn't per video. I had a couple really big ones that did about 40,000, but a lot of the other ones were maybe more 10 or 20. So with Cuff Bust, and looking at how efficient some of these other ways of getting views are, like, I'm not sure that after Cuff Bust, like, I'll continue doing devlogs for this game, but after Cuff Bust, I don't know that I'm really going to do a lot of devlogs for my future projects, because, like, with Cuff Bust, I've got an influencer contact list right now with hundreds of names on it, hundreds of massive YouTubers that all want to play it when it comes out. Okay, when it comes time to release it, I'll send out some keys, give them some, give them free access. They'll be able to play it on their channels, and it's going to get probably billions of views when it releases. Okay, basically any amount of marketing that I could do on my own personal channels would be dwarfed day one just by the YouTube coverage that it gets. So the utility of the devlogs in a case like mine is pretty much reduced to community management, community engagement, and just kind of keeping the fans up to date, keeping people up to date with where the progress is, things like that, right? Kind of keeping the community included in the development rather than just shoving them off. In the future, quite regularly, I might shove them off. Not entirely, obviously. I think I would probably make other, maybe like a devlog when I announce a game, a devlog when I release a game, maybe an update video somewhere in between. But I probably wouldn't do a bunch of consistent stuff because, again, it does take time that could be spent on other stuff. Next big point of nuance here, it does take a lot of time to learn how social media works and to really understand it. YouTube, I mean, basically out of all the social media platforms, YouTube is the most difficult to grow on. But if you understand how it works and you do start to grow on YouTube, it is absolutely, it gives you the most potential. It gives you the most earning potential off of ad revenue and sponsorships, right? Sponsorships on TikTok are non-existent. Like, that doesn't really happen. You don't really make much money off of that. Ad revenue on TikTok, ad revenue and sponsorships on Twitter, like, that doesn't exist. I mean, actually, I think you can get ad revenue on Twitter, but is it significant? No, not really. Also with YouTube, again, since it's long form content and it's the biggest platform around, you naturally gain a much larger and much more loyal fan base because they get to spend more time with you, right? A 10-second clip on TikTok doesn't allow you to get to know the developer, but a 10-minute video allows you to feel like you know them a little bit more. But all of that upside comes with the difficulty of figuring out how to create and edit entertaining long-form content that it does take time, right? Like, if you decide that you want to do devlogs, you're not signing up to start just like, oh, I'm going to make videos this week. Like, no, you're going to spend years over time researching and learning and becoming a YouTuber, right? So it's not an easy thing to do. It's also worth noting that not every game works well for devlogs, okay? The type of game that's going to work best for devlogs is going to be the type of game that is going to appeal to a broad audience, okay? Most indie games already are way too niche to really appeal to a broad audience. But if you're making something that's colorful, something that's like a shooter game, something like Choo-Choo Charles that, just sort of this general appeal horror game, that works well with a wide variety of people. So it can actually go viral, right? There are millions of people who want to watch videos about this game, so it can actually get millions of views. If there are not 10 million people that want to watch videos about your game, you will not get 10 million views, okay? You won't even get a fraction of that. So if you have a game that does have mass appeal potential, then it can do well for devlogs. What that kind of means is it's like, you can't necessarily be halfway through development and then just be like, I'm going to start doing devlogs. Because who knows if your game is actually good for devlogs. Ideally, this would be a part of your development strategy from day one. Like, when you're deciding what kind of game you want to make, if you're like, I want devlogs to be a big part of my marketing strategy, then you need to say, okay, I need to make a game that will work in this format. Another thing that I see a lot is that you'll have people who, they start learning game development and they start doing devlogs at the same time. They have no experience with YouTube, they have no experience with game development, and they're learning both simultaneously. That's fine. You can do that, but it's going to be particularly difficult. game development is already very, very difficult. It takes a lot of time to figure out what you're doing and to make interesting stuff. And so if you're documenting the process of you just getting through the initial, like, random difficulties of learning game development, just stumbling through stuff, that might be, you're probably going to have more time between progress updates, right? Because you're still figuring stuff out. It might be less entertaining to watch because if you're making amateur games, people might not be as engaged because they're like, well, am I really going to play this when it comes out? Probably not, because it looks like crap. Again, this one depends on the scenario, but it is something that you should be careful about. Like, if you're brand new to game development and you're working on your first game, it might be best to just figure out how to make games first. Like, get good at making games, release some games, start getting good feedback. Once you're starting to get some decent feedback, then maybe you can pile on this whole other thing of becoming a YouTuber, because trying to do it all at once, it would be very difficult. If you're up for it, go for it, but it's going to be particularly hard. Other thing here is, if you are not a full-time game developer, it's also going to be particularly difficult. I've been full-time since I started working on Choo-Choo Charles, and because of that, I can make a pretty solid amount of progress in a couple months. I was also working pretty crazy hours on Choo-Choo Charles. Okay, so I was able to make a lot of progress in a month or two. But if you've got another full-time job, part-time job, you got a wife and kids, you got other stuff going on in your life, if you're only able to put in like a couple hours a week on the weekends into your game, you're going to have a lot of time in between potential progress updates because it's simply taking you longer to get stuff done. Because of that, it can be very, very, very difficult to keep up with devlogs in any sort of a timely fashion. Because again, it's like, ideally you wouldn't spend 5 months in between devlogs. Ideally you could put out something every like month or so. Again, the algorithm doesn't care, but your fans might. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's like, how much progress can you actually make, and how quickly can you make stuff that's worth noting. And lastly, I'm just going to give you a quick tip here, and save you a couple years worth of headache. This is something that every single successful devlogger does, and it's something that every single unsuccessful devlogger doesn't do. So here's the deal. Most game development channels that are trying to grow, they do a blend of entertainment content and educational content. Here's the problem. When you upload a Unity tutorial, and then a game development advice video on marketing or something, and then a devlog, who's going to be watching your channel? Okay, when you're starting out a channel, well, okay, I'll put it this way. On YouTube, there are essentially two key types of content. There's educational content and there's entertainment content. Educational content is going to be search focused, right? If you want to get views on educational content, it needs to be optimized for SEO, for search engines, right? It's going to be for people that log on to YouTube, they go to the search bar and they say, how to market an indie game. And then your video might pop up and then they'll watch it there. If you're making entertainment, where the goal is to go viral and the goal is to get recommended, that stuff needs to get pushed onto the homepage or into other recommended feeds on YouTube, so that the people who just go onto YouTube and they scroll for a bit and they see a video, oh, that looks interesting, and they click on it, they watch it, okay? If you have a channel that's split between entertainment and education, you're going to have a very difficult time. So when you start out a channel, it's much more difficult to grow entertainment-based content, because in order for YouTube to recommend content to a broad audience, they need to know what kind of audience will enjoy it. And it can take a lot of time. It could take you 50 videos over the course of 3 years before you trickle in enough views that YouTube has enough data to say, okay, this is the type of person that likes this channel's content, and now we can be hyper-focused and target it at them. If you're getting 10 views per video, that's not necessarily a large enough data set for YouTube to find the right audience. So because of that, it's very difficult to get views on entertainment content early on. What a lot of people do when they're starting a channel is they'll try and put out some educational content. because since it's search engine optimized and people are specifically going to their search bar and they're looking up this topic, if you can get in between the search bar and the search results, you will basically guarantee views. It is way, way, way easier early on to get views on educational content. But the downside of that is that there's a hard limit to how many views you can get on educational content, especially in the game development space. Like, how many people are there really looking for educational game development content, especially if it's stuff like specific, hyper-specific, like software tutorials, like, oh, how to add an inventory system in Unity. It's like, that is very specific. You're not going to get 30 million views off of something like that. There's a hard limit to how many people want to watch content like that. So it's easier to get those views early on, but it becomes impossible to scale past a certain point. So where the real problem comes in is you've got two types of content that you're uploading. Entertainment, which is supposed to go towards gamers. Education, that's supposed to go towards game developers. But the content that's getting the most views is the education, right? You're getting thousands of views on your education videos, but your entertainment videos are only getting maybe 10, 20, or 100 because it's, again, the search engine stuff is naturally going to get more views early on. Because of this, YouTube builds up this data set that says, okay, the type of person that enjoys watching this channel's videos are people who make games, people who use Unity, people who are working on shooter games, whatever it might be. It's going to be, they're going to build up this data set around the developers, the game developers. And then anytime that you try and release a new piece of entertainment-based content, YouTube is going to recommend it to that wrong audience. They're going to recommend it to game developers. And then those game developers they're going to be like, I don't really want to watch this. This isn't really what I'm interested in, because it's some entertainment video and it's somebody running around screaming about milk or something, and they're like, no, I want to learn about syntax. And so they're going to give you a bad click-through rate. They're going to give you bad retention. And YouTube is going to say, wow, this video sucks. This person's core audience, the people that watch all their other videos, hate it. They're not watching it at all. So this must be an awful video, and they're going to bury it, and they're going to stop promoting it. This puts you painted into a corner in which your entertainment-based content cannot thrive. It cannot go viral unless something magical happens. Let's say, I don't know, some streamer makes a reaction video to it. For me, I was stuck in this exact same corner. For years on my main channel, my main 2-Star Games channel, for like 2 years, I made Unreal Engine tutorials. I've delisted all of them, and I'll mention why in a second, but it's on the same topic. I made specific Unreal Engine tutorials. And then I was like, I want to start transitioning into more like game development advice videos. I want to talk more about my experience with game development. I want to talk about, just other topics. So I started doing some of that. Again, still educational, developer-focused stuff. And then I was like, I want to transition towards devlogs. I want to make devlogs because I was looking at people like Dani, and I was like, this guy can get millions and millions of views and hundreds of thousands of wish lists by going viral with these entertaining videos. I need to start doing that because I want to start building an actual audience of players rather than game developers. So I started trying to transition into that kind of content, and it was not going anywhere. And eventually I realized YouTube just they think that this content sucks because they're promoting it to the wrong people. They've got this massive data set that says my channel appeals to game developers and that it doesn't appeal to whoever else. They don't have any data. There are no players watching my content, so they're not pushing it to the right people. What it took for me was it took Choo-Choo Charles blowing up. So I put out the Choo-Choo Charles trailer. It first kind of blew up on Twitter, and a lot of those views started coming over to YouTube. That trailer got, I don't know, a couple 100,000 views moderately quickly, and I like doubled my subscriber count. I was dead stuck at like 7,000 subscribers. And when that trailer came out and kind of went viral, my subscriber count doubled. I got to like 14,000. And then I saw, okay, this is an opportunity because now YouTube has this new data set to show like, oh, these are people that would actually like this kind of content, that would actually like entertaining content. And so then I started being able to do the Choo-Choo Charles devlogs, and they started getting pushed out to the correct audience. And then my channel was finally able to actually gain a lot of traction, get a lot of views, and blow up. So here's the deal. If you want to get into devlogs, the absolute worst thing that you could do is make educational content. Okay, this channel here, this is educational content. It is not going on my main channel. It is going right here. The stupidest thing that I could do is put it on my 2-star channel. That would be awful. It's going to be really, really tempting to start trying to make game development advice videos and tutorials and stuff like that because it's guaranteed views, but it will hurt you in the long run, right? Keep making the educational content or the entertaining content. Keep doing that. Keep getting your, 5, 10, 20 views per video. If the content is good, eventually YouTube will find the right audience for it. But if you're trying to mix audiences on the same channel, you will fail. Okay? It's going to be very, very difficult to get any traction. So that's my big tip. So ultimately, should you start doing devlogs for your games? Maybe. I don't know. All that I'm doing is I'm giving you a more nuanced look at what it actually means, what's actually involved, what the peak success can look like, and obviously we know what the minimum success looks like. It looks like absolutely nothing. But now you got a nuanced look. It's not just some binary thing. And it's, keep in mind, this is a long-term business decision. This is not, I'm just going to start doing this for the fun of it. If you want to be successful doing devlogs for your games, you need to know that you're signing up for years worth of time learning to become a YouTuber. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of learning. But if you do it correctly, it can work very, very well, and it can be a very lucrative strategy. It's got a lot of upsides. It gives you more options for funding, more options for marketing, better rapport with your community. There's a lot of upsides, but it is also difficult. There are downsides, as I've mentioned, and just requires some careful consideration on your part. That's it.